Yo and hello, welcome to the Idiot's Lounge. Sorry there. Uh, Today I just feel like reading some shit that I find interesting, or found interesting, rather. Just give me a second here. Alright. So, first up, uh, creator of SpongeBob SquarePants, Stephen Hillenburg, dies at age 57. Posted this morning at quarter to 10 PST. Uh, Stephen Hillenburg, the creator of the Nickelodeon animated mega hit SpongeBob SquarePants, died Monday. He was 57. Hillenburg, a former marine biology teacher, died of complications from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis at his home in Southern California. He was diagnosed with the neurodegenerative disease in March 2017. Nickelodeon announced his death in a tweet Tuesday. We are sad to share the news of the passing of Stephen Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants. Today we are observing a moment of silence to honor his life and work. Hillenburg was a 9-time Emmy nominee for SpongeBob, but never a winner. Wow, what a tease. Ouch, that's just not once? Out of 9 times, that's cruel. I bet they feel like dicks now. In February at the Annie Awards in Los Angeles, Hillenburg was among those given a Winsor McKay honor for his career contributions to animation. Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob, made the stage presentation and accepted the award on Hillenburg's behalf as he remained seated to receive a standing ovation. Born August 21st, 1961 in Lawton, Oklahoma, Hillenburg graduated from Northern California's Humboldt State University in '84 with a bachelor's degree in natural resource planning and interpretation, with an emphasis on marine resources. Obviously, SpongeBob is a comedy, but it really was inspired by me liking marine science, he said in an interview in 2015. I focused on that. I never thought the two would come together. While working as a marine biology teacher at the Orange County Marine Institute, now the Ocean Institute, in Dana Point, California, Hillenburg noticed that animation started booming, and that led him to enroll at the California Institute of the Arts in Valencia as a graduate student in '87. He left 5 years later with a degree in experimental animation. Starting in '93, Hillenburg wrote and directed for Rocko's Modern Life and Rugrats at Nickelodeon. Martin Olson, a writer on Rocko's Modern Life, admired a comic book that Hillenburg had drawn and written about Tide Pods. It got me thinking, if I were to do a show, it would be about these invertebrates and these crazy animals that exist in the ocean, Hillenburg recalled. It was that moment that said, maybe I should pursue this. SpongeBob SquarePants premiered in May of 1999. The series, which has won multiple awards, including honors from the British Emmys, the Annies, and ASCAP, has aired more than 250 episodes during its nearly 2 decades on air. Hillenburg also was an early voice actor for Potty the Parrot and played the ukulele for some of the show's original music. Neat. SpongeBob has been adapted twice for the big screen, for 2004's The SpongeBob SquarePants Movie, and again for 2015's The SpongeBob Movie Sponge Out of Water. Additionally, the character found life on the stage in the Tony-winning SpongeBob SquarePants, the Broadway musical, which wrapped a 327-show stint in September. Hillenburg is survived by his wife of 20 years, Karen. The character Karen Plankton is named for her. Son Clay, mother Nancy, brother Brian, and his wife Isabel, and nieces Emma and Hazel. Steve imbued SpongeBob SquarePants with a unique sense of humor and innocence that has brought joy to generations of kids and families everywhere, Nickelodeon said. His utterly original characters and the world of Bikini Bottom will long stand as a reminder of the value of optimism, friendship, and the limitless power of imagination. I think that was nicely written. Now I want something a little more lighter. Where'd it go? Oh, wait. Guys heard of Guts game yet? An edible controller moves gaming from the screen to your gut. Just like Back to the Future 2 predicted, gamepads are so old-fashioned. A new pill acts as the controller for a new video game out of Australia's Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. In the Guts game, two players will have anywhere from 24 to 36 hours to kill off a digital parasite by raising and lowering the temperature of their digestive systems as measured by the pill, reports New Scientist. Players are encouraged to do whatever they need to raise or lower their body temperatures and kill off their virtual bugs. Eat spicy food, drink icy water, go for a jog, or anything else. When the Guts game was presented at Chai Play 2018, a gaming technology convention held in Melbourne in late October, New Scientist reports the developers reassured the crowd that any temperature changes in the body were completely safe. After all, people eat spicy food and exercise all the time. There's nothing about doing so for a new video game that suddenly makes it dangerous. That sounds like a reasonable answer, but just so casually brushed off. Presumably, the Guts game's version of cheat codes would be popping the pill before sweating your virtual parasite out in a sauna. But since you would have to buy each single-use pill, this sort of defeats the point. Like all good things in the world, this game too must end. Players in the Guts game are in an endless race against time, against whom there are no victors. Win or lose, the game ends the moment the controller leaves the body. Wow. That sounds like a shitty game. Like, why would you want to waste your money and time on such a literal shitty game? Like, who even comes up with this stuff? Like, Well, let's just hope it stays in Australia and then dies there. Because I really don't want to see this becoming popular. Moving on. Chinese researcher claims first gene-edited babies. A Chinese researcher claims that he helped make the world's first genetically edited babies, twin girls born this month whose DNA he said he altered with a powerful new tool capable of rewriting the very blueprint of life. If true, it would be a profound leap of science and ethics. A U.S. scientist said he took part in the work in China, but this kind of gene editing is banned in the United States because the DNA changes can pass to future generations and its risks harming other genes. Many mainstream scientists think it's too unsafe to try, and some denounce the Chinese report as human experimentation. Researcher He Jiankyu of Shenzhen said he altered embryos for 7 couples during fertility treatments, with 1 pregnancy resulting thus far. He said his goal was not to cure or prevent any inherited disease, but to try to bestow a trait that few people naturally have: an ability to resist possible future infection with HIV, the AIDS virus. He said the parents involved declined to be identified or interviewed, and he would not say where they live or where they work or where the work was done. There is no independent confirmation of claims, and it has not been published in a journal where it would be vetted by other experts. He revealed it Monday in Hong Kong to one of the organizers of an international conference on gene editing that is set to begin Tuesday, and today. And in earlier exclusive interviews, the Associated Press, I feel a strong responsibility that it's not just to make a first, but also make it an example, he told the AP. Society will decide what to do next in terms of allowing or forbidding such science. Some scientists were astounded to hear of the claim and strongly condemned it, naturally. It's unconscionable, an experiment on human beings that is not morally or ethically defensible, said Dr. Kiran Musunuru, a University of Pennsylvania gene editing expert and editor of a genetics journal. This is far too premature, said Dr. Eric Topol. Epic fail. This is far too premature, said Dr. Eric Topol, who heads the Scripps Research Translation Institute in California. We're dealing with the operating instructions of a human being. It's a big deal. However, one famed geneticist, Harvard University's George Church, defended attempting gene editing for HIV, which he called a major and growing public health threat. I think this is justifiable, Church said of that goal. In recent years, scientists have discovered a relatively easy way to edit genes, strands of DNA that govern the body, a tool called CRISPR-Cas9? I'm gonna put it in the. That's what it's called. Makes it possible to operate on DNA to supply a needed gene or disable one that's causing problems. It's only recently been tried in adults to treat deadly diseases, and the changes are confined to that person. Editing sperm, eggs, or embryos is different. The changes can be inherited. In the US, it's not allowed except for lab research. China outlaws human cloning, but not specifically gene editing. He Jiankui goes by J.K., studied at Rice and Stanford universities in the U.S. before returning to his homeland to open a lab at Southern University of Science and Technology of China in Shenzhen, where he where he also has two genetics companies. The university said that's literally what it's saying, seriously violated academy ethics and standards and plan to investigate. A spokesman for he confirmed that he has been on leave from teaching since early this year, but he remains on the faculty and has a lab at the school. Also, welcome Gucci for life. Yes, rip Stephen Hillenburg. The U.S. scientist who worked with him on this project after he returned to China was physics and bioengineering professor Michael Dean, who was his advisor at Rice in Houston. Dean also holds what he calls a small stake in and is on the scientific advisory boards of his two companies. Okay. The Chinese researcher said he practiced editing mice, monkey, and human embryos in the lab for several years and has applied for patents on his methods. Give me a second here. He said he chose embryo gene editing for HIV because these infections are a big problem in China. He sought to disable a gene editing called CCR5 that forms a protein doorway that allows HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, to enter a cell. All of the men in the project had HIV and all of the women did not, but the gene editing was not aimed at preventing the small risk of transmission. He said the fathers had their infections deeply suppressed by standard HIV medicines and there are simple ways to keep them from infecting offspring that do not involve altering genes. Instead, the appeal was to offer couples affected by HIV a chance to have a child that might be protected from a similar fate. He recruited couples through a Beijing-based AIDS advocacy group called Bai Hualing. I probably butchered that likely. Its leader, known by the pseudonym Bai Hua, told the AP that it's not uncommon for people with HIV to lose jobs or have trouble getting medical care if their infections are revealed. Here is how he described the work. The gene editing occurs during IVF, or lab dish fertilization. First, sperm was washed to separate it from the semen, the fluid where HIV can lurk. A single sperm was placed into a single egg to create an embryo. Then the gene editing tool was added. When the embryos were 3 to 5 days old, a few cells were removed and checked for editing. Couples could choose whether to use edited or unedited embryos for pregnancy attempts. In all, 16 of 22 embryos were edited, and 11 embryos were used in 6 implant attempts before the twin pregnancy was achieved, he said. Test subject that one twin had both copies of the intended gene altered and the other had just one altered. No evidence of harm to other genes, he said. People with one copy of the gene could still get HIV, although some very limited research suggests their health might decline more slowly once they do. Which wouldn't be so bad, I suppose, but it still sucks. Several scientists reviewed materials that he provided to the AP and said tests so far are insufficient to say the editing worked or to rule out harm. They also noted evidence that the editing was incomplete and that at least one twin appears to be a patchwork of cells with various changes. It's almost like not editing at all. If only some of certain cells were altered because HIV infection could still occur, Church said. Church and Musunuru questioned the decision to allow one of the embryos to be used in a pregnancy attempt because the Chinese researchers said they knew in advance that both copies of the intended gene had not been altered. In that child, there really was almost nothing to be gained in terms of protection against HIV, and yet you're exposing that child to all the unknown safety risks, Musunuru said. The use of that embryo suggests that the researchers' main emphasis was on testing editing rather than avoiding this disease, Church said. Even if editing worked perfectly, people without normal CCR5 genes face higher risks of getting certain other viruses, such as West Nile, and of dying from the flu. Since there are many ways to prevent HIV infection, and it's very treatable if it occurs, those other medical risks are a concern, Musunuru said. There also are questions about the way he said he proceeded. He gave official notice of his work long after he said he started it, on November 8th, on a Chinese registry of clinical trials. It's unclear whether participants fully understood the purpose and potential risks and benefits. For example, consent forms called the project an AIDS vaccine development program, which it's clearly not. The Rice scientist team said he was present in China when potential participants gave their consent and that he absolutely thinks they were able to understand the risks. Thinks is not the right word. You have to be completely certain that they do, and you have to be able to confirm it. Let's continue. Deem said he worked with he on vaccine research at Vice, and he considers the gene editing similar to a vaccine. That might be a layman's way of describing it, he said. Both men are physics experts with no experience running human clinical trials. The Chinese scientist, he said he personally made the goals clear and told participants that embryo gene editing has never been tried before and carries risks. He said he also would provide insurance coverage for any children conceived through the project and plans medical follow-up until the children are 18 and longer if they agree once they're adults. Further pregnancy attempts are on hold until the safety of this one is analyzed and experts in the field weigh in. But participants were not told in advance that they might not have a chance to try what they signed up for once a first was achieved. He acknowledged free fertility treatment was part of the deal they were offered. He sought and received approval for his project from Shenzhen Harmonicare Women's and Children's Hospital, which is not one of the 4 hospitals that he said provided embryos for his research or the pregnancy attempts. Some staff at some of the other hospitals were kept in the dark about the nature of the research. Excuse me. Excuse me. Some staff at some of the other hospitals were kept in the dark about the nature of the research, which he and Deem said was done to keep some participants' HIV infection from being disclosed. We think this is ethical, said Lin Zitong, a Harmonicare administrator who heads the ethics panel. Any medical staff who handled samples that might contain HIV were aware, he said. An embryologist in his lab, Qin Jinzhao, confirmed to the AP that he did sperm washing and injected the gene editing tool in some of the pregnancy attempts. Study participants are not ethicists, he said, but are as much authorities on what is correct and what is wrong because it's their life on the line. I believe this is going to help the families and their children, he said. If it causes unwanted side effects or harm, I would feel the same pain as they do, and it's going to be my own responsibility. AP science writer Christina Larson, video journalist Emily Wang, and her researcher Fu Ting contributed to this report from Beijing and Shenzhen, China. This Associated Press series was produced in partnership with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute's Department of Science Education. The AP is solely responsible for all content. Oh, that's a lot to take in. Hmm. Well, let's see here. What do we have next? Indian authorities pause plan to retrieve body of U.S. missionary. This comes from CNN, posted at 11:30 this morning. It was an update from the one I read before I went to sleep this morning. I think. Uh, New Delhi CNN. Authorities in India have decided to hold off retrieving the body of the American national feared killed on North Sentinel Island amid concerns about a possible confrontation with the tribe that lives there. John Allen Chow is believed to have been killed by Sentinelese tribesmen after he visited their island home in the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago. Fuck, learned to read much. In November, breaching local laws strictly prohibiting contact with the isolated natives, or isolated people rather. Indian police say Chow found local fishermen who agreed to take him near the island. Before using a canoe the rest of the way, days later, the fishermen, who have since been arrested for facilitating this trip, say they saw the tribespeople dragging his body around the island. We want to avoid direct confrontation with the tribespeople, Dipendra Pathak, Director General of Police of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, told CNN when asked about the latest efforts to retrieve Chow's body. We do not want to go there and create an unhappy situation. Yeah. Decision to avoid a direct confrontation with the isolated tribe came after a series of meetings and reconnaissance trips made by the officials. Anthropologists and tribal experts were also consulted. By Sunday, authorities had mapped out the area with the help of the fishermen and observed several members of the tribe walking around the area where eyewitnesses claimed to have seen Chow's body dragged and buried. However, despite ruling out any immediate attempts to land on the island, local police would not categorically rule out retrieving the body at a future date. We are working on it. We'll firm up a plan very soon, said Pathak. And just to see where the islands are there. Got a good map there, so it gives a good idea of where this remote island is. So if you're ever in the area, try to avoid this part right there. Um, Most isolated tribe, the Sentinelese. Sentinelese have lived in complete isolation on the remote northern Sentinel Island for tens of thousands of years. The island, which is part of India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands territory, is roughly as large as Manhattan. India has protected the island for decades to prevent the Sentinelese from contracting modern illnesses and to keep outsiders safe. People are not allowed to go within the 5 nautical miles of the island by Indian law, and the Indian Navy patrols it day and night. And while its residents have no contact with the outside world, they aren't too far from other civilizations. The island is only about 50 kilometers (31 miles) west of Port Blair, the territory's capital, known to tourists for its stunning emerald beaches, history, and water sports. At least 15 Sentinelese could be living on the island, according to the India's census estimates from 2011. He returned to his boat twice before vanishing. Traveling on a tourist visa, Chow arrived at the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in October with one mission: preach to these Sentinelese. Indian authorities say Chow was 27, but Matt Staver, founder of a Christian ministry that Chow was involved with as a college student, gave Chow's age as 26. He had traveled to the remote island years ago and returned knowing that his mission was illegal and risky. Still, he wanted to get to know the islanders' way of life. He hoped to eventually share the gospel and perhaps translate the Bible, said a friend, John Middleton Ramsey. He asked a local friend and an electronic engineer to get a boat and also recruit others, several fishermen and a water sports expert who could help him. He carefully planned his expedition and used a 13-page long journal to write his strategy, the steps he would take to reach the island, and later, some of his memories. After he paid the fishermen around $350, police said the group boarded a wooded boat fitted with motors and headed to the island on the night of November 15th. They stopped a little less than half a mile away and waited in the dark. At some point in the morning, Chow used a canoe to reach the shore of the island, Pathak said. He returned later that day with arrow injuries, police said, but that did not discourage him. He returned to the island the following day. It's unclear what happened, but the tribespeople broke his canoe. He had no other option than to swim back to the boat. On the third attempt of his mission, he didn't come back. The fishermen said they later saw the tribespeople dragging his body around, but police haven't been able to independently verify Chow's death. Authorities believe he was killed. All 7 locals who facilitated the trip have been arrested. Wow, that is rough. Wow. Missing missionary in an isolated island. Presumed dead. Well, I think we'll lighten things up here with, if I can find something for it. Well, apparently the wage gap has started to get more accurate. Instead of 23% less, it's now 20% less, apparently. Women are earning 20% less than men as global wage growth falls. No, yesterday morning, huh? Real wage growth in group of 20 nations slowed last year, especially in advanced economies, as inflation eroded pay gains, according to data compiled by the International Labour Organization. Pay growth across the group, whose leaders are preparing to meet this week in Argentina, declined to 2.1% from 2.7% in 2016. Workers in advanced nations saw the weakest gains, with wage increases of 0.4%. That's the least since 2014 and compares to growth of 4.3 among emerging economies. God damn it, why can't I speak right now? It's puzzling that in high-income economies we see slow wage growth alongside a recovery in GDP growth and falling unemployment, said ILO Director General Guy Ryder. Oh, God. General Guy Ryder. Jesus Christ. That poor kid. Uh, Early indications suggest that slow wage growth continues in 2018. So basically, you're just saying that you're gonna lie a little less about it. Okay, that's good enough. That's enough. There's no need to continue with that then. Alright, I guess that'll do for this, and I want to thank you for joining me, and I hope you like what you see. If not, be sure to let me know so I can work on it or not do it again or whatever the fuck you made today. Have yourself a good one, and goodbye.